Tony Soprano is one of the most complex characters in television history because he is not a villain in the classical sense. At the same time, he is not a hero either. Tony exists in the space between these two categories, and that is exactly why he feels real and deeply unsettling. He is a mafia boss who carries out criminal acts without hesitation. Yet he is also a man who loves his family, worries about his children, feels isolated, and lies awake at night unable to sleep. While watching him, the audience is trapped in a constant contradiction. We hate Tony, but at the same time we are drawn to him and cannot help but try to understand him. The Sopranos is not a story that romanticizes crime. It is a series about the psychological damage that power inflicts on the human mind. Tony Soprano is the walking embodiment of those wounds. To understand him is not just to understand a mafia leader, but to understand the inner conflict of the modern human being. Tony Soprano's story begins with panic attacks. This is a deliberate and highly professional narrative choice, because in psychology, panic attacks are the body's rebellion against suppressed emotions, and emotions always find a way to surface. Tony has control over every aspect of his life. The fate of others rests between his lips. Yet the irony is this: the one thing he can control the least is his own mind. Tony's panic attacks are the return of fears, guilt, and anger he has suppressed for years. These attacks shatter the image of his strength. For the first time, he realizes he is not invincible. That is why he goes to therapy. But Tony does not go to therapy to heal. He goes to regain control. In his world, staying powerful and never letting go of control is the only rule for survival. He wants to understand himself, but he does not want to change, because change would erode the predatory, brutal image he has built. He wants to know the source of his pain, but he has no desire to dry it up. The key to understanding Tony Soprano's personality lies in his mother, Livia. Livia Soprano is a mother figure who uses love as a weapon, manipulates through guilt, and is emotionally destructive, a narcissistic parent with deep anger issues. On the other hand, Tony's father is a mafia boss, and within mafia culture, the concept of mistresses is normalized and deeply ingrained. Living for years fully aware of her husband's affairs, Tony's mother became increasingly fragile, internalized a sense of worthlessness, and redirected her rage toward her children. This dynamic shaped the emotional environment Tony grew up in. From a psychoanalytic perspective, Tony carries an unresolved maternal trauma. Love was never a safe place for him. For Tony, love has always come with a cost and an underlying threat. As a result, in adulthood, Tony suffocates in close relationships, becomes uncomfortable when he sees others happy, feels restless and uneasy when he is loved, desires attachment but instinctively sabotages it. One of the clearest examples of this is when he sabotages a family dinner organized by his sister and leaves the house feeling relieved only after turning harmony into conflict. All of Tony's problems with women and family are continuations of this early emotional distortion. In his mind, love and pain have become inseparable, leaving deep psychological scars. Tony Soprano's philosophy is simple but dark. The world is not fair, and justice is an invention of the weak. That is why Tony sees himself and his men as soldiers, because he believes that soldiers do not go to hell. This perception erases his moral boundaries and normalizes violence in his mind. Tony does not believe in morality. He believes in order. Chaos is his greatest fear. For him, violence is not a tool of cruelty, but a necessity that maintains structure. It is the price of keeping the world from collapsing. Tony's sense of morality is purely functional. Something is right if it works. It is wrong if it disrupts order. This mindset separates him from classical moral philosophy and pushes him toward a form of pragmatic nihilism. What matters to Tony is not being good, but surviving. Because in his world, it is not the good who survive. It is the strong. And only the strong can protect their family. In one pivotal scene, Johnny Sack, leader of one of New York's most powerful and feared mafia families, and Tony's close friend, is arrested at his daughter's wedding. Overcome with emotion, he breaks down and cries. In that exact moment, he loses the respect and fear of his men and the wider mafia world. He is immediately seen as weak, vulnerable, and unfit to lead. This moment deeply affects Tony. Even when he is physically broken and close to death, he feels compelled to constantly prove his strength to his men. That is why he is always in motion, always acting, always asserting power. because in Tony's world, standing still is the same as dying. Tony Soprano's therapy process is one of the most disturbing aspects of the series, because therapy does not make Tony more ethical or more compassionate. It only helps him become aware of the truth and recognize himself. On the contrary, through therapy, Tony understands his emotions more clearly, sharpens his ability to manipulate, learns how to act without feeling guilt. At this point, therapy stops being a tool for healing and turns into a tool for efficiency, becoming far more dangerous. Eventually, the therapist he trusts and cares for realizes what is happening and decides to stop treating Tony. This leaves Tony in a profound void, and his panic attacks intensify. Tony comes to know himself, but he does not transcend himself. Awareness increases, but responsibility does not. This is where Tony's tragedy deepens and becomes inescapable. Tony Soprano's fundamental existential problem is this: he is free, but he does not want to carry the burden of that freedom. Tony makes choices, but he refuses to take ownership of their consequences. He ties his actions to his past, his family, and the system. At this point, Tony becomes a typical example of the modern individual. And here, a single philosophical sentence summarizes Tony's story: man is condemned to be free. Jean-Paul Sartre. Tony is free, but that freedom weighs heavily on him, because being free eliminates excuses and delivers a harsh confrontation with reality, and Tony cannot tolerate that reality. Instead, he constantly attributes the consequences of his actions to his father, his past, his family, and what he has witnessed. In therapy, he repeatedly argues that people do not truly have a choice, that they are only obligated to do what is required of them, to put food on the table, to take care of their family, even if that means crossing moral boundaries. He speaks of the system as justification, using it to escape responsibility for his own freedom. Tony Soprano is both compassionate and ruthless at the same time. He is a devoted family man and a good father, yet also a feared mafia boss. This contradiction is not a weakness, it is the core of his character. Violence is not a moral issue for him. It has become a reflex, a habit. However, this does not mean Tony is completely devoid of emotion. At times, he hesitates in the face of innocence. He performs acts of kindness and avoids harming the weak and defenseless. When a stripper is harmed, he kills Ralph Cifaretto, one of his closest associates and most profitable men, because Tony's world operates solely according to his own beliefs and internal rules. Yet this hesitation never truly stops him, because Tony does not want to change. He wants to continue as he is, because in his mind, this is the only way to survive. Tony Soprano's story is not a story of redemption. It is the story of a man whose awareness increases, but who never transforms. Tony comes to know himself, but he never transcends himself. He sees the pain, but he refuses to confront it. He does not let go of power, because letting go of power would mean letting go of himself. And perhaps the most disturbing truth is this: Tony Soprano is not an exception. He is a dark yet honest reflection of our time. Tony Soprano shows us that power does not heal a person, awareness does not save a person, and change is only possible when responsibility is taken. Tony never does this, and that is why Tony Soprano is not just a mafia boss, but the symbol of the modern human being's failed negotiation with conscience.